Hey, badass, beautiful coaches. As you probably know, one of the banes of the coaching industry is the phrase, well, you didn't get the results because you didn't do the work. How many times have you heard that said to you? And I hope you haven't had to say that to any of your clients. But today I'm here with Lisa, who's going to share the neuroscience behind teaching people more effectively so that you're less likely to have to say that to your clients, and so that your clients also can benefit from this knowledge. So if you want to make your coaching a lot more effective, if you want to get more glowing testimonials instead of disappointed people, and if you just want to create bigger results for the people in your community, whether you're paid coaching and your other content, you're definitely going to want to tune into this. So thank you very much for being here, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, what are some of the common mistakes you see people like coaches and educators make because they don't understand the neuroscience behind adult learning?
You, I believe that coaches, and teachers, we're not just talking about coaches here. Um, we're also talking about university lecturers, trainers, they don't, they are content experts and they haven't learnt the science behind teaching and learning. More about learning as an adult and understanding how, growing up as an adult, that we've encountered trauma, that, we've got some, things that are holding us back. And understanding that the science is actually quite simple. It's quite relational, and it's not overly time consuming, but like with a little bit of understanding, you can really improve your impact.
So, what are the ways in which you've seen people's impact dampened by a lack of knowledge of this science of learning?
I think disengagement in the classroom, and whether that's excuse me, on Zoom or face to face, often when you have people that know what they're talking about and have experienced the benefits of, their life lessons, and they're desperate to share it. The enthusiasm sometimes is the enthusiasm is there, but translating that into the meaningfulness of the client is missing, so
Hmm.
the person becomes disengaged and they're not going to learn.
Yeah, I see that with sometimes with people saying stuff like, I'll help you shift your paradigms. Yeah, okay, you understand the benefit and the significance of that, but your clients aren't going to automatically translate into this is how it's going to make my life better.
Yeah, and they've got all their stuff that happens when we're learning. I'm not a good learner. I can't do this. I won't have time. We're adult learners carry a huge lot of baggage, which that means we've lived life. So it's getting through that so that you can develop that connection, so that you can really support and believe that this person can learn. It's really important.
So if somebody is in, say, a coaching session, a lecture hall, a free Zoom presentation where they're trying to get clients, and they sense that their clients or their audience is starting to kind of tune out, they're not that engaged, they're maybe questioning the value of what the presenter, coach, or teacher is saying. What are some things they can do to re-engage people and get them back into interested learning mode?
Okay. I spent 5 years researching adult learning, and I went to Asia to write up my final thesis because I was finding that I was too busy to really get into my own research, and finish off my learning. And I think that's a mistake that we often make. We pile all this information on, and we're not giving time for the learner to absorb. How we learn best as adults is in community. So how can we do that? We've got to step away from I'm the expert, you know, and let the community, the adult learners, if we can put them in groups and, have that conversation, or even if it's a one-on-one, let them ask questions, let them absorb the information, allow them time to get their thinking happening. And that's what learning is as an adult. We're shaping people's thinking. They need to critique it. We need to be a little bit critical. We need to be vulnerable, but we've got to make that space safe as well so that people are brave enough to step into their vulnerability. We're making it safe to be vulnerable. So it's more than just giving them, another PDF or another whatever it is, because chances are they're not going to go back to it after. your session. You want long term, and we've got to have time and relationship
So if they're
throughout.
having that issue where they feel like they don't have time, do you have some sort of neuroscience-based approach to help them feel like they have more time or help them make that time?
Well, yeah. Well, we've got to give time. We've got to repeat what we do. We've got to give it in clear, concrete. We've got to use concrete stuff. So we've got to get people to move while they're learning, to raise their energy. If we
Like
can.
physically move?
Yeah, physically moves really, important, because we don't have the concentration span to sit for longer than 20 minutes and absorb. Like anything more than 20 minutes without moving, we've lost the last 10 minutes anyway. Um, it's we're just not made that way. So we've got to break it up into small bits. We've got to break the learning up into small bits and use our imagination. Like, if I'm teaching you about how the mind works, I might just grab some concrete materials, my glasses case and a highlighter, and, put one on top of the other and sort of say, this is your, I don't know, your long-term memory, but you've got a short-term memory too. And the short-term memory is a lot smaller. So while we put our information in our short-term memory to start with, ideally, we want to transfer it to the long-term memory. And you could ask them to look around and see what they could pick up, to have a concrete, something to touch and hold and feel in front of them while we're going through, this concrete learning material. And then we will change that to maybe a picture, something to represent it, and then give them an activity so that they really understand that learning takes time if you want it to go to our long-term memory.
That makes
Repetition.
sense. And so, do you find how it helps to, like, even if they can't hold it in their hands, to refer to stuff in the environment, like that long-term, short-term memory? If you use the analogy that you're sitting at your desk, well, the short-term memory is the papers you have on the desk, and then that filing cabinet over there, that's your long-term memory, harder to access, but more long-term storage and more organized.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We're using the imagination. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it seems like so far the theme is kind of slowing down a bit, giving them time to absorb, to ask questions, to
Yeah.
participate, and to consciously engage with the learning instead of just drinking out of a fire hose.
Yes, yeah. And if we can give them the opportunity, like in Zoom, we've got Zoom rooms, we've got, there's lots of opportunities to engage the community too, so that, it's a little bit more relaxed, to ask questions, to be less formal. Mm.
And so, let's say somebody's hosting an event on Zoom to say, those educational events people do, like webinars and such, to show their expertise and then try and get people as clients. If
Yeah.
someone's doing something like that, do you recommend like having just one big Q&A at the end, or kind of having mini Q&As interspersed after each teaching point?
I like, questions as you go, because it's more meaningful to the person. And sometimes that can lead, it gets the educator, the coach, to understand where that person's coming from. And like I said before, relationships really important. So, and you've got content you have to deliver. Are there any questions? Can I explain anything further? Can you give me an example? You can ask somebody to give you an example. Use the chat. The more that we can engage people in the community, um, which means you have to construct questions well.
Mm.
We have to be able to construct really um, questions that are going to make people think.
And think specifically enough. Like one analogy I like to use, I use an example of, say, a relationship coach helping a male client to meet and marry the woman in his dreams. If you just say, what kind of woman do you want to meet? That's so big and abstract that they might not be able to figure it out, or they might not get the insights they need to disentangle what they really want from what society tells them to want. Whereas if you ask
Yeah.
stuff like, what kind of experiences have you had that you'd like to share with your partner? Or what kind of experiences do you imagine having that you want to experience with your partner? That's a lot more specific, and it gets them thinking in more depth about what they really want. So what's your
It's
take on that?
that's so true. And also, if you're talking about a relationship coach, we're talking about the person's feelings. So what does your ideal partner, how does that person make you feel? how do you feel when you get a message from them on the phone, so we're tapping into our body, because I think we need to do more of that. We're learning more. The neuroscience that's around is it's really evolving to be a body science. And then when you look back at ancient work, they've been doing this for years. We've just shut it off for so long, and we've just got to come back into it. So I think the mechanisms are there. We just need to practice it a little bit more. The science has been around for thousands of years.
Yeah, I think in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, especially Western society, just gotten a bit too arrogant in disregarding the wisdoms from other cultures that other cultures have known some of these things for so long, and then people come in and just, oh no, our cultural way of doing things is better, and they ignore all this science, all this knowledge that has been serving people well for ages.
Yes, yeah, it's interesting. I worked for 3 years in the Northern Territory, in Australia, in the desert, and watching the way that Indigenous people deal with death and loss, where they grieve loudly. Everybody's expected to wail. We don't mention their name. We change their name to Kumanjai was where I was, and so if a son had the same name, then his name became Kumanjai because we didn't mention that name again. But just that wailing, that crying, that you were expected to cry so loud and let your feelings go. And in our culture, we're saying, no, no, you know, that stiff upper lip, we've all come from the British. We don't show emotions, but it's no good for our bodies, and it's no good for our learning, because, we've got to let our mind be free to be who we are. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the analogy that emotions are messengers, and if you don't listen to the messenger, it's not just going to go away. It's going to like go to the basement and lift weights and come back stronger, or you'll come back in speaking a
Yeah.
different language, and it's still going to be there. It's just going to be a bit harder to parse because it's now become divorced from its original source, and it's no longer so obvious where it's coming from.
Yeah, and that's so true. And as educators, that's what we've got to do in our classrooms, whether they're virtual, whether they're one-to-one. We've got to create a space that's safe for people to be who they are, for people to make mistakes so that they can move forward. And we've got to acknowledge that none of us are perfect, and that we're all learning. I might be the one standing in front of the class, but mate, I am got lots of flaws, and I don't know everything. That's why I'm still learning, and that's why I still love learning. Yeah.
That's important to me. I think it should be coaches who are listening to this and who are kind of perfectionists or who are, say, scared to start a webinar, scared to start a coaching program. Because what if it isn't perfect? What if I screw up? What if people look down on me or think I'm incompetent? You know what? People are a lot more forgiving than you think. And they, honestly, the ones who are going to jump down your throat for a mistake, you don't want to work with them anyway. And, especially when it comes to technology and such, people are just a lot more likely to be understanding. And when they see you just being human, they see you making mistakes, I think it serves as proof that A, it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to be imperfect, and B, it's okay for them to be like that. Because if you can screw up, if you can have technical difficulties, if you can have difficult patches of your life that you've struggled through, and still come out the other end successful enough that you can help other people to succeed, it tells them that even if they're struggling, even if they're not perfect, they can succeed too. I got one sales pitch from a person who was talking about how their business was just instant lightning in a bottle. Everything went perfect. They immediately start getting all these sales. They never struggled. Yeah, you're completely unrelatable, and I've had challenges in my business, and you probably can't help me with them because you have no idea what it's like.
Yeah. And I think it's actually, like, it's necessary. It's not just okay. It's necessary to be vulnerable. It's necessary to show up as your true authentic self. And that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's showing up as your beautiful, imperfect self, with a passion to help other people to see the world a little bit differently, so that they can show up in their pure, imperfect self as well and help somebody else. And, that's how we build a better world.
Yeah, and the first time tried to host a 3-day challenge, I completely lost the Zoom interface. Like I'm supposed to be checking the chat. My slides are showing, check, does anybody have any questions in the chat? Well, I can't even access the chat because the whole interface is just gone. Turns out it's because I had a second monitor, which was off. And when I started sharing the screen, Zoom in its infinite wisdom decided to put all the interface up in the monitor that wasn't even on. So yeah, I went through the entire first day of that presentation unable to interact with most of Zoom's interface. And you know
Yeah.
what? Nobody got mad at me for it. On the second day, I finally figured out what was wrong, and we all had this mini celebration.
Yeah. And did they all come back?
Most of them, you know how it is with multi-day challenges.
Yeah.
Sometimes people can't make it through all the sessions, but you know, nobody indicated that they didn't come back because of that issue. It was more like life got in
Really?
the way.
Yeah. So you were able to connect with them anyway on a different level. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I think as long as you're honest about what's going on and you don't try and hide it or pretend things are okay, or as long as people don't spell BS, they're a lot more likely to just be okay with it. You know, if you send the same email twice, or you send the email prematurely. Okay, I think we had a glitch with the time machine to send the email out early. Infuse the humor
Yes.
into it.
It's all right. It happens. This is life. This is real life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's
So
really important because, that it makes you look human and you're the
yeah.
one who's delivering, this information that they've paid to come and see. Um, and it's like, oh, I can relate. You've got that relatability. And I think that's really important.
And I think
Yeah.
it kind of makes you feel more safe because if a person is so uptight that every little mistake, every little error is the end of the world, they're not really safe to be around.
No, no, no. And it is. Well, yeah. And that's part of making that safe environment. That's part of creating an environment that's safe. It's not just a physical, it's an emotional safety and it's an intellectual safety. It's safe to bear my emotions, because nobody's going to judge me for being a crazy old lady. Which is probably a term we should get rid of. But, we've grown up in this culture. But it's okay. It's okay. It's necessary. It's actually more than okay. It's necessary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even on a physical, like physiological level, I don't remember the exact list of physiological aspects, but like you get too stressed and blood flow starts moving out of the part of the brain that is responsible for good decision making, higher level thinking, and such, and into the more fight or flight survival related areas. It's like
Yeah.
you physically got less blood flow and less resources with which to think and learn and make good decisions when you're stressed.
Yeah. And I think it's really important too to understand how that works too, that we have this ancient system, that triggers the fight and flight, and it's there to protect you. So don't fight it. Just sort of, we need to acknowledge it. But then when we can move to, our more humanness, well, like I don't know, one book I was reading was saying, well, it's from a neuroscientist, so I probably believe them, that it was, we've got these reptilian brains, but then we went through a transformation, thousands of years later into our mammal self, but we've still got this reptile brain. And, the reptiles are the fight and flight, they'll attack if they feel scared, like a snake will bite you if it feels scared. But the mammals, we evolved into more nurturing, loving, suckling our young, raising our young. The reptiles, basically the babies raise themselves, hatch from the egg and off they go. Whereas the mammals, babies are born live and we nurture them. We feed them from our own body. We live in packs. So our response to stress is different. But we still have this fight and flight. But we've got to recognize that, because by denying it, we're denying who we are. That's okay to feel like that. And what does that look like in the classroom? That's the people that shut down, go away, and mightn't come back. But by creating that safe environment first up, you're giving them the invitation to come back whenever they feel ready, without the pressure, when they've calmed down, knowing that they are welcomed and they're normal. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, are there any other strategies that you recommend people incorporate into their teaching or coaching method that you often see them miss?
I am a planner. Planning works for me. So I always have 3 or 4 different lesson plans, I guess, that are guided towards different stages of development, so that I can, without having to stress myself out,
Mm.
I've already thought about it and I've got different ways of approaching the same thing. Like that's not only good for all learners, but especially for those ones that haven't got the idea initially. So instead of shutting it down, we revisit it, but in a different way. Yeah. I think that's really important. So your planning's really important. Know that repetition is part of it. Our cognitive load theory is a really interesting theory, but it's so simple. It's we can only remember so much. And when we have too much, we get stressed. When we get stressed, we get those anxious hormones that are not going to help us remember. So, how can we change that around and promote happy hormones rather than stress hormones? So we've got to be light. My background's nursing and teaching. So I was a registered nurse and a primary school teacher before, and then I got into leadership and all that other stuff. But so as a primary school teacher, I like concrete materials and I like fun. And I found in the adult classrooms, we've got to have fun, and fun helps our learning because we're releasing happy hormones. We've got to get people moving, but we've also got to, have fun with what we do. And sometimes that's making fun at me because I've made a mistake, whatever, but yeah, you want people to leave. You want people to feel joy, but you want them to leave remembering. So at the beginning, we introduce what we're going to talk about. In the middle, we do what we're talking about. And then at the end, we say, we've talked about this, that, and the other thing. There's that repetition. And we're also, checking for understanding throughout the way, looking at the questions that we're using, looking at how we are helping people to think critically.
That all sounds good, Ted. Yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about how you made that transition from being a registered nurse into the nursing come first and then the teacher, or the teacher and then the nursing?
Yeah, no, nursing came first. And it was basically when I had two ambitions. One was nursing, one was teaching. I feel like I was really lucky in that perspective. But as I had children, got married, have children, got pregnant, became a single mum. I had two children, I had no husband, and there was no way I could do shift work. So it was like the universe was telling me, well, it's time to transition. So I went back to uni. I did a Bachelor of Education. Um, so when my eldest child was having at school for the first year, that was my first year teaching. So we went through the whole of their primary school together with both of them. They're only a year apart. And then I did a retraining program into nursing, went back to nursing and ran a training organization looking at nursing products, and was teaching at the uni casually. They sent me an email saying, do you want to do a doctorate? And I'm like, nah.
Cool.
Yeah, I know. And then I thought, yeah, I do. So, yeah. So that was, in a nutshell, that was my journey. Yeah. But it was basically life. I think if life didn't happen, then yeah, I'd be in nurse education. Well, I'm in nurse education still, and teacher education. I still work casually at the uni. I love it.
And it's awesome that you were able to take these two different passions of yours and fuse them into something that's so unique and so make them better together.
Yeah, yeah. It's really quite unique. I think. I think I'm the only nurse with a doctorate in education and a master's in education.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of one before. I'm sure in the breadth of human experience, there's someone out there, but you're the first one I've met.
Yeah, so yeah, and I've tapped into my learning nerd self. I really enjoy it, and I think it's really important that as teachers we are learners.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you once you stop learning, you just wind up stagnating. You don't evolve along with what's going on in the world. You end up like Blockbuster.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it keeps us motivated, doesn't it? It keeps
Yeah.
us engaged. especially if you're, um, interested in what we're doing. There's always something more to learn. There's always new approaches. There's always that teacher that says things a little bit differently.
Mm,
You know, there's we can always learn from each other and through each other.
absolutely. So we're getting to the half hour mark, so I'm going to wrap it up. So if somebody wants to learn more about this, if they want to learn more about how to keep their students or their clients or their attendees more engaged, how to make them feel safe, how to help them have fun, if they want to get better at this, what is their next step?
Well, connect with me, like I'm on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. I've got a website, the Academy of Learning for Adults, the academyoflearning.com.au. But I'm in the middle of refurbishing that and just having a lisaellem.com. But I haven't got that one going at the moment. So at the moment, it's the academyoflearning.com.au.
Definitely.
Yeah, but reach out. I'm really keen to talk to people.
That sounds wonderful. And for those of you who are watching, I'm going to have the link to the websites, to the social media, and all that in the show notes. So whether you're watching on my blog, on YouTube, on social media, wherever you are, it'll be in the description or the post, etc. So it'll be easier for you to find.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think this is really important work. I really feel like this is really important work. And, we just, yeah, need to
Yes,
teach people well so we can build a better community. Yeah.
absolutely. And so that those people who have spent so much time developing such amazing expertise that can transform lives are actually able to share that expertise in a way that people can receive and see the value in and actually use to improve their lives.
Yeah, being able to connect, being able to, yeah, step back from being the content expert and actually learn the art and the science of
Mm.
teaching and learning. Yeah. For adults, it's really good. It's different from children.
But I think there are some commonalities. I kind of wonder if teachers of school kids let their kids move around more periodically, get the blood flowing, get the brains engaged. Just kind of, I know personally, maybe it's just an ADHD thing, but I find if I have to concentrate too long without moving around, I kind of start getting overloaded and running around. It's almost like what's the term, the vehicle carburetor? When you kind of run a vehicle hard and kind of clear out the gunk. I find that helps to do that for me. So I can't help but wonder if that's just me or if a lot of other people, adult and children, need that.
It's actually good teaching practice. Yeah, it's not just you. And they say when you're a primary school teacher that, if you're teaching 10-year-olds, then your lessons should be 10 minus 3. So it should be 7 minutes long. And then after 18, it should be 18 minus 3. So we're talking at 15 minutes. That's all we've got a concentration span for before we need to change activities or do the same activity, but in a different way.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you very much for sharing all this. And for those who are watching, I encourage you to connect with Lisa and check out the links that are going to be with this interview and you get in touch with her. Yeah, thanks again for being here. Thanks for sharing your expertise, and I hope you and all the people watching have an amazing day.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're very welcome.